Kia ora, g'day, welcome back once again. Here in this video, I'm going to be talking about the New Zealand and the Australian SAS selection, and more so, some of the parts that don't often get spoken about. So let's jump in. Every time the SAS selection gets talked about, it's usually about the same things. The fitness required, the navigation, the weight, the suffering, the isolation, the uncertainty, the stress, and so on and so forth. And don't get me wrong, all of that matters. I'm not dismissing any of it. But after going through selection on both sides of the Tasman, I've come to realise that there's more that doesn't often get spoken about. And in my opinion, for what it's worth, it's just as important. I'm not here to compare or argue which selection is tougher or harder, the New Zealand one or the Australian one. They're both brutal at the end of the day, and I personally struggled through both of them. What I do want to talk about is the less visible stuff, the things that quietly shape outcomes, and if not acknowledged and understood, basically can end the hopes and dreams of many aspiring candidates. What you're being assessed on. In both New Zealand and Australia, selection isn't just about whether or not you can move fast over a set distance with a certain amount of weight. You're being assessed constantly on how you carry and how you conduct yourself, especially when things aren't going well. How you move, how you speak, your dress and bearing, how you treat others, how you respond when you're tired, isolated, frustrated, and under pressure. Do you strut around talking like a cocky prick? Or do you shrink into yourself, head down, barely making eye contact, speaking so softly and quietly that people can hardly hear what you're saying? Or do you move with quiet confidence, not loud, not boastful, just competent, with a clear communication style and a calming presence? And when you're challenged or questioned, do you take ownership of your mistakes? Or do you sit back and let someone else get hammered for something that you know you did? When you're isolated, exhausted, or in pain, do you have the self-drive to keep pushing on? Or do you need constant encouragement to keep moving? When things go sideways and you know you're being observed and assessed, do you stay calm and work through the problem? Or do you panic, freeze, get aggressive, start blaming others, or just flat out ignore the problem? When you're under time pressure and you hit an obstacle, do you concede and just sit back and say there's no way this can be done? Or do you keep trying anyway? When you're given a task with clear instructions, are you disciplined enough to follow them? Or do you choose to do your own thing because you think you know better? When you're put in charge, do you think that because you're in charge, that only your way matters? Or are you humble enough to listen to other ideas, to acknowledge a better solution, even if it comes from someone less experienced than you? And if that better idea works, do you give credit where credit's due? Or do you try to take it and palm it off as your own and hope that nobody else notices? You don't just fail selection because you may be physically too weak or too slow. You can also fail selection because you don't fit. The family cost nobody mentions. Selection stress doesn't just start on day one. It can start weeks or months earlier, sometimes even years. And whether you have a family or not, it affects more than just you. If you're in a relationship, it can already be under strain before selection even begins. Time spent preparing, time away from home, partners feeling like they come second, candidates trying to convince themselves that they're doing this in order to give their family a better life, when really the candidate's just doing it for themselves because it's a job that they want to do, that they want to work and serve in, and there's nothing wrong with that. The reality is some candidates can start to wish and feel like and think that they were single so that they wouldn't have anybody else to worry about and they can just focus in on what it is that they want to do in terms of their goal and aspiration of trying to make it into the regiment. And if that happens, and when that has happened sometimes, partners can feel pushed away and disconnected. And one of the harsh realities is that passing selection or making it into the unit doesn't magically fix any of that. In fact, in some cases, it can make it worse. Being unable to talk about your work creates more distance. Bringing your work home, whether physically or mentally, can create more friction. Your partner wants you present when you're at home, not still doing and or thinking about work. And just to be clear, this video isn't being put up to try to give you tools or teach you how to have a good relationship. I'm the last person you should be asking for that. And truth be told, these issues and challenges are not unique to the SAS. They happen everywhere. I'm talking about them here in this video because they exist and they rarely, if ever, get spoken about openly. So I'm choosing to do that in this video. You know, at least for me, as I think about it, it can be daunting, man. There's no class, there's no blueprint, there's no set of lessons or handbook that you can read or study or go through to prepare you for the environment and the challenges that can and will come with your relationship if you choose to serve in the regiment or go on selection. People, couples, families, we're all just learning in the process, learning in the moment and doing the best we can. Sadly, some relationships don't survive the process, while others, they grow stronger through it. To me, from my perspective, what matters is acknowledging and understanding that these issues exist, because pretending they don't, doesn't help anybody. And I haven't even touched on the impact that this can have on children, their perspective, their understanding, their relationships. So from my perspective, just as long as people understand that these factors do exist and they're an important part with regards to anybody seeking to go on selection or looking to serve within the regiment. Comparing ourselves to others. In my experience, one of the biggest traps that people can fall into whilst on selection is comparing themselves to others. Making unfounded assumptions based on how somebody looks, how confident they appear, how much experience they have or don't have. It's all noise. Throw those thoughts out the window, focus on yourself, and focus on the instructions that the directing staff are giving you. Personally, I think that's important, not just for selection, but just for life in general. My experience has been for selection, and I guess to a degree in life in general, but specifically for selection, those candidates who are quietly confident, who carry themselves with humility, more often than not, do well on selection and on cycle, and eventually when they're in the unit. Selection, it's going to expose you and your weaknesses soon enough. So just don't waste your energy worrying about how you stack up against others. Well, what happens after selection, whether you fail or whether you pass? Failure on selection is rarely spoken about openly. And although personally I've been fortunate to pass both the New Zealand and the Australian selection, I can understand, or I can imagine, why it's not something that people want to have a good or big conversation about if they've come off selection having failed. Over the years, though, I have been fortunate to speak with a number of people that have failed selection, that have been kind enough to speak with me and give their thoughts and feedback, and it's been able to help me get a bit of an insight into that side of things, and things that I probably wouldn't have been aware of or wouldn't have done anything about if it wasn't for the people that have been kind enough to share some of their experience with me. Most candidates who fail return to their parent unit quietly, feeling disappointed, feeling embarrassed, feeling isolated, and that can be a lonely place to be. Some of those candidates who fail may be highly driven, and a number of those have been able to bounce back relatively quickly and get back on the horse and reapply to go back on the next available selection. And that's great for those candidates that are able to do that. But the ones that might not be that way inclined, in my opinion, and based on what I've heard speaking with those candidates that have shared this, they need and should have some support. With that being said, good leaders, good friends will gather around those people and be a sounding board. They'll be there to provide guidance or advice where they can. And if nothing else, just to be on standby, ready to support. Whereas, poor leaders and fake friends, they won't do that. So choose and decide which leader, which friend you want to be. And just to try to re-emphasize, failing selection is nothing to be embarrassed about. And only an idiot, in my opinion, whether they're badged or not, only an idiot would look to put somebody down or try to make somebody feel bad or embarrassed for giving selection a crack and coming up short. For some people, they go on selection, they fail, and they never go back again, and they're good with that. They went on selection, they discovered that for whatever reason it wasn't for them, and they're happy. They got their answers and they don't go back in return. And there's nothing wrong with that either. And I guess the last part, as for those that have passed, well, most are just relieved, proud, and really just focused on what comes next. in terms of their aspirations and next steps and progression towards looking to become an operator within the unit. The cycle of training. Now, this isn't a judgment. This is just my experience in regards to having had the good fortune and privilege to go through both the New Zealand cycle and the Australian cycle. In New Zealand, I found the cycle to be much more intense than Australia. I even found the cycle of training to be far more intensive than the SAS selection itself. The pressure to perform can be really consuming and confronting. And what helped me was just stripping everything back to basics. For me, that just meant looking, listening, and doing what the instructors told me to do to the best of my ability. Don't overthink it, don't try to be clever, and just keep it simple. In Australia, the cycle felt different, still demanding, still professional, but for me personally, the learning environment itself felt less stressful. And for me, it just made it easier, I felt, to absorb the information that was being delivered to us. So, overall, different approaches, different environment, but the same end goal. And assessing, I believe anyway, assessing individuals for very much the same types of characteristics, traits, and values. The directing staff bias. This one comes up a bit. Now, the directing staff, they're not there to be your mates on selection. And in my personal take, they're not there to fail you either. Not during the selection portion of your journey to look to try to join the unit. The directing staff are professionals who are there to do a job. They're there looking to identify individuals who will potentially be a good fit as an operator within the unit. So to anyone looking to blame a directing staff for a personality clash or saying the directing staff didn't like you, take a good hard look at your attitude, your actions, and your performance. That's what matters to the people in the unit. Why soldiers quit selection. This is another topic that comes up a fair bit. And again, I've been fortunate to have a bit of experience in speaking with people who have withdrawn at their own request, who have decided to pull the pin, pull the plug, who have decided to quit, who have decided to throw in the towel. And truth be told, people quit for many number of reasons. Candidates can simply be distracted. They've got too much going on in their head. In conjunction with that, candidates who I've spoken with who have mentioned about looking too far ahead, trying to anticipate what's coming up instead of staying present with where they are. And some of those looking at what's to come, acknowledging and realizing how they're feeling now and thinking that they're going to be even worse by the time they get to that stage, and then talking themselves out of it before they even get there. So, again, not staying present. And which flows into the next piece, which connects pretty well. Candidates having negative self-talk for a whole number of things. I can't do this. The staff doesn't like me. I don't think I'm going to get there in time. So what's the point in carrying on anyway? Just a whole bunch of stuff happening. Candidates can quit due to focusing on their physical pain and fatigue that they're feeling right now. And again, allowing those thoughts to stay present in their mind, to just constantly occupy the forefront of their mind, and then again talking themselves out of continuing. And with that, candidates quit due to their lack of physical and mental preparation before showing up for selection. Again, likewise, candidates can and will quit due to having a lack of resilience prior to selection before they got there, particularly when things get hard. And obviously people can and will quit when they feel like they're injured. Injuries do happen, legitimate injuries do happen, and people will quit due to an injury. And typically there'll be some sort of note mentioned, withdrawn due to injury, or some candidates at the same time don't withdraw due to injury. It's a call that sometimes, very rarely though, but is sometimes made by a medical officer who's looking at a candidate and who genuinely believes that the candidate may be putting themselves in more harm and danger or risk by allowing them to continue. So that's not somebody quitting, obviously, that's them being withdrawn. But I throw that one in there in amongst the injuries because people can and or will use or try to use an injury as their reason to come off the course. There seems to be a thought that there's more integrity is sort of kept intact. It's less embarrassing For an individual, that's probably a better way of putting it. People find that it's less embarrassing if they've been removed from the course for an injury, rather than putting up their hand and just being honest and going, listen, I didn't prepare well enough. I can't go in anymore. I can't go on anymore. Or I don't think I can go on anymore and I want to quit right now. So I think people think there's a bit more, honor in being withdrawn rather than quitting. At the same time, with that, many will quit simply because they're not mentally or emotionally prepared for the lonely, grinding nature of the process. Working through problems whilst you're exhausted, while you're hungry, borderline dehydrated, suffering heat stress while under pressure, the list goes on. A lot of people will quit because they're not mentally and or emotionally prepared for that. And although this video's intent isn't about trying to teach you or tell you how to do things to prepare you for those types of things, I will drop and share, I suppose, some thoughts and or my personal take around what I think is helpful when it comes to trying to build up some resilience, build up mental capacity, build up physical preparation and capacity as well to be able to endure some of those things. And with that, that being said, my take, for what it's worth, doing hard things, doing hard physical things is important. It does matter. Getting up and doing things even when you don't want to, that matters. Likewise, those things that you choose to do, and with that, things may get quite hard and it may seem pointless, but refusing to quit even when it seems pointless, that matters. In my opinion, again, for what it's worth and in my experience, doing those types of things prior to getting to selection teaches you how you respond when things get uncomfortable. And again, just my opinion, based on my experience, I think having a good understanding of what you will do when things get uncomfortable is a real game changer, but it's a very, very valuable lesson and understanding to have about oneself. Selection itself, my opinion, it rewards physical and mental strength. It rewards emotional intelligence, and it rewards consistency and discipline. That old saying, do the mahi, get the treats, or, put the work in and reap the rewards. You reap what you sow. Well, that's that for this video. I just wanted to try and provide a little bit of additional information around things that I don't think, or I haven't seen a lot of stuff spoken about with regards to selection, and some of the quiet stuff that maybe bubbles away in the background that people don't necessarily know too much about, or may not have thought or expected, or maybe they have, but maybe hearing it out loud in a video like this might help bring things a little bit more home and easier for people to understand, and or help people with regards to where their expectations might be, and or how or where, what stage you may be at with regards to your preparation for selection. It's not about trying to compare which selection is harder. As I mentioned at the start multiple times, both New Zealand and Australian selection, they're both brutal, they're both hard, and I struggled through both of them. So anyway, I hope it helps. That being said, the message is always the same. Regardless of any challenges, difficulties, trials you may be going through, or somebody you know, the message is the same: to keep turning up, keep staying in the fight, put one foot in front of the other, take one day at a time. Know and trust that things can do and will get better if you want them to. So just stick at it. The sun will shine again. Those better days are closer than you think, and there is a light at the end of that tunnel. No matter how long, dark and lonely and miserable it may seem and or feel right now, there is a light at the end of that tunnel, and it is worth continuing to keep going. Just push on. Ask for help if you need to. Reach out for help. No shame in that. And provide help if you're able to. If you're somebody that's in a good space and you know somebody that might be struggling and you're in a position to lift that person up, there's nothing wrong with doing that as well. So, just all do our part, do our bit to try to help one another as best we can. That being said, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there is a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation and gratitude for you all.